sure I look good. That's okay. Can we see me? Can everybody see and hear me? Hey. So I wasn't planning on being your speaker today, but here we are. Like the Indian River Lagoon, we're going to flow with it. And it's too bad because Nick had such a great talk. I saw him talk at the Marine Resource Council, and I think I'm going to try and post that to the group so you can see it. It was a really interesting talk about the Indian River and our history with the Ais people, which is actually where the Indian River is named after, is the Ais Indians. It used to be called, I think, the something in Spanish, de Ais, which was the name of the original inhabitants, and they changed it to the Indian River Lagoon. So I thought that was really interesting. But instead, we're going to talk about climate change and pirates. Yes, climate change and pirates. So this is a podcast I listened to on NPR a while ago. And again, this is off the top of my head, so forgive me if I get the details wrong. But 3 climate scientists walk into a bar is how we're starting. So yes, there was a conference, and everyone was hanging out after the conference at the bar. There was a tree ring specialist, there was a shipwreck specialist, and there was a hurricane specialist. And they're all hanging out together in this bar, and they're talking. And so the tree ring scientist had a mystery. And the mystery was, he worked down in the Keys, and he had a couple years where the rings were almost non-existent, like this tree didn't grow at all, and he couldn't figure out why a tree wouldn't grow. So he got the brilliant idea. He was talking in the bar, and he's talking with the hurricane specialist. And they were trying to figure out if it lined up with any hurricanes. Well, the hurricane information only goes back a little ways. They go till about the 18th century. So they looked at some of the tree rings, and in fact, some of the years that the tree rings didn't form at all were the same years that there was heavy hurricane activity. So you would think with a hurricane, all that wind, everything would really get it going. But no, it didn't. It stressed out the tree so much that it couldn't grow. So the tree rings were this little. But, a tree ring goes back, hundreds of years. But the climate data for the hurricanes only went back about 100 years, the 1800s. So 100, 200 years. So he couldn't really verify any of the stuff earlier, as, scientists do. We try to verify. We try to make sure everything lines up. So in order to make the hurricane data confer with the tree ring data, their hypothesis is every time the tree rings are small, that's when hurricane activity was heavy. Of course, we don't have that data. But what data do we have? We have shipwreck data. So we bring in the third person, the shipwreck specialist. And so what this person does is they go and they look at the wood that was made from the shipwrecks. And they look at the rings on the wood from the shipwreck to see when the ships wrecked and when the ships were made. So they analyze it through that. Now, we're going to get to pirates, I promise. We're getting there. So they had a theory. Now people who do shipwrecks, who do the manifest for all the people who did the ships, they kept meticulous records of when a ship went down, of course, because that's their goods, that's their labor, that's everything about that. So they wanted to make sure, so they had a really good record of when a ship went down, when it was wrecked. And a lot of ships, of course, went down from hurricane activity. So we don't have hurricane activity from that time, but we have shipwreck data. So, okay, they're all in the bar and they're kind of getting their stuff together. So you've got the tree ring guy who's got specific tree rings saying, in like the 15th, 16th century, this tree didn't grow very well. We have shipwreck data saying, around this time, a bunch of ships wrecked. So when was there not as much hurricane activity? The golden age of piracy. Back when we had all the famous pirates in the 16th and 17th century, we were in something, and forgive me, I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. We were in like a mini ice age. It's a famous time called the Mandermedian, I think it was called, something like that. Yeah, it's a time when during that ice age, the water was really cold. So during that time, when the water is really cold, there's not a lot of hurricanes and not a lot of activity stirring things up. So what can flourish during that time? Piracy. So that's where we get pirates. So pirates flourished because the waters were cooler. So because the waters have been more chaotic with the climate change and the changing and the warming of the waters, it's very bad for pirates. So pirates should be very much against global warming because it interferes with their piracy. So again, we're all in this bar, we're getting together, we're talking about it, so we're trying to line up that data. So now we have shipwrecks, we've got hurricane data, and we've got tree rings. So that means that the hurricane specialists can figure that since they only have data to the 1800s, they now have hundreds more years based on the tree rings and based on the shipwrecks, because they took their maps, the shipwreck people and the tree ring people took their maps of where the things were lined up. Perfect match almost, complete match. So everything kind of lined up, all the science lined up, and that's why we get piracy in the golden age of piracy, and that's why it meandered off during the time when the warmer waters happened. Now you're probably wondering, well, you know, that's a normal cycle. They say that a lot with climate change. That's a normal cycle. Waters get warmer, waters get colder. But what they actually figured out from this is we are actually on the lower end of the cycles of the ice age and all that. So the world is going to naturally just get warmer. It should not actually have gotten this warm by this point. So yes, man-made climate change was proven by this because we are still getting warmer naturally in this natural cycle, but we have gone farther beyond that. So it's a whole thing. It was a whole podcast. It was really interesting. I had planned to actually talk about it at some point, but we're just doing it now because, hey, we're flowing like the Indian River Lagoon. That's what we're doing. So that is how piracy and climate change go together. So, ta-da! I would love to hear any comments or questions you have.